All right, hi everybody. This is Decentralized Colorado. This is Lightning Talks version 11, and this is our webcam version. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Will Carter. I'm hosting tonight, and I'm going to we'll go down the board and let people introduce themselves, starting with Crypto Rick, and then hand it off down the line. So welcome, Rick. I'm happy to hear that you're going to be speaking with us tonight.
Hey, thanks, Will. Thanks for having me here and for putting this thing together, man. It's really something that I'm excited to be a part of. I run the Boulder Valley Bitcoin Meetup and do a podcast called Block Digest, and this is like really right in the wheelhouse. And it's just it's good to see us doing this, getting together remotely, and maybe we can have these discussions on a regular basis. So yeah, I appreciate you getting this together.
Thanks. I really appreciate you being here, and it's glad to see a good portion of the community showing up. Thank you again. Who's up next? Dan, you want to introduce yourself? Did you go?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Dan Shields, and so here I do a lot in the general Colorado blockchain community, but really what I'm all about, Decentralize. It's anywhere and anything we can do. So tonight I'll be talking a little bit about more than just blockchain. So stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate you being here. And how about Tyler, Bain? How about you?
Hey, fellas. I go by Bain on Twitter. Yeah, my name's Tyler. Stoked to be a part of this and share some thoughts. I'm excited about the entire community and really just about electrical enthusiasm and some of the natures of decentralized networks. So thanks for having me.
Sweet. Thanks for being here, Tyler. And I think Tommy's out there, right? How about you, Tommy?
Hey guys, I'm Tommy. I co-organize the Denver Crypto Party. Yeah, thanks again, Will, for having me and allowing me to have a platform to show my project on. I'll just say that what really interests me in this space is governance. So that's kind of what I'll be talking about tonight.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to your presentation. So without further, I think what we'll go to next is I'm going to present my screen just for some quick announcements. So I'm sharing my screen now. Hopefully you guys see it. And presenting. Version 11, like I said, we've done this 11 times. This is the first web version, so I'm super excited. Looks like we got a good start. I'm going to save announcements for the end as we normally do. And the last thing I really want to say is just reiterate our mission statement for Decentralized Colorado, and I'll just read it off for you guys. We're here to amplify the Colorado blockchain community voice and attract others to connect with us to create on decentralized platforms. So we're all about decentralization. We're all about shilling Colorado. And if you'd like to follow us and learn more, or if you'd like to speak, be sure to hit us up on Twitter at Decentralized Colorado, and we'll get you on here. This is super fun to do. So that's my little pitch at the beginning. And I think, Rick, you're up first. So if you want to take over, and I'll set the timer, and we'll sit back and listen and hopefully be enlightened.
All right, man. Yeah. All right. So let's just go. Let me do this. This is my first time fiddling with Zoom, but I think I got the screen share thing set up correctly. So, all right.
Woohoo! Looks great.
All right, fantastic. So I threw these slides together, and I'm trying to get through this topic, even though it's pretty meaty. So I don't know why it's trying to keep rotating on me. I guess it's trying to. All right, sorry. It's just like trying to push through the slides. I'll just work through it. So this is what we usually see whenever you search decentralization in the internet. You'll see some sort of. I'm sorry. Let me do this real quick. Like, can y'all still see this like this? Fine.
Yeah, we see you just fine, Mike.
All right, because this will actually give me control of the slides still. So if you search decentralization on the internet, you'll usually come up with this image and this graph to show the three structures of the data here, as far as like a centralized point that is where the data is coming from, distributed, where it's all interconnected, but you could still sort of isolate away pieces of the information, and then decentralized, which shows this sort of graph of, points into other points, which I think is a pretty good example of showing the visualization. But I think the reality of this whole decentralization is it's something more like this, where you have forks operating within consensus of the protocol. So, I mean, you know, these systems, you could kind of just replicate and duplicate them, or, you know, make them operate within or outside of consensus as you'd like. So I think this is where we're starting to see this, this data structure kind of imitate nature, really. But let's keep digging into this. So the surface for decentralization in blockchains, there's these multiple surfaces where people can say that there's centralization or decentralization, and a lot of it is talk where we don't really know where the level is as far as the appropriate level of decentralized area of that part of the ecosystem. And the first part we're going to start with is software, which you know, a lot of that has to do with clients and nodes. And if you, I just pulled this from CoinDance today. This is from Data Today. This is the amount of Bitcoin clients out there. And we can see a large portion is Bitcoin Core. And I know that a lot of people say that's a centralization risk, but that also has a lot to do with validation on the network. And you want this to be a system of validation and making sure that we have verification of the information without that third party. And so this 96% of core is, it's easily changeable and interchangeable. I mean, Bitcoin UASF down here at 0.38%, that actually was over 60% in 2017. And that kind of forced the hand of the SegWit upgrade, which after that was implemented, most everybody just went back to the most recent core implementation. But once we start looking even further, like recently in September of this last year, just recently, there was a bug, a CVE bug, that caused a headache within Bitcoin, where there's a known vulnerability to where you could tinker with someone's information in their node if you could get there. But it's really a specialized attack surface. It's very narrow in its vector. And so a lot of people, you know, tend to not really worry that much about it. And I don't know, we're starting to see the metrics of maybe these outdated nodes of 22% of the network might be nodes that have just gone offline. Maybe they've passed away. Maybe they just are not around anymore. And these vulnerable nodes of 57% of the nodes still out there, I mean, that's something where it's kind of troubling to know that that's the way the node situation is, but it also sort of shows that there's a lot of people out there who are just downloading the node software and not necessarily keeping up to date with the front line of where development is going. But this 18% for sure is doing that. And when you look at this, really, this is 57% of 96%. So it's definitely not half the network. It's a percentage, but it's not a great enough percentage to really start worrying about the CVE vulnerability actually causing problems on the network. However, that's just my own personal view. I'm sure there's others that would speak otherwise. So going back real quick to kind of just browse over, because I know I've got on a time limit. So hardware, we're talking about mining hardware and full node hardware, hardware that takes to validate the blockchain, hardware that it takes to mine the blocks. And in the mining hardware, a lot of that has to do with the consensus algorithm, which you want that to be a centralized point where people are, you know, validating that or working on that proof of work algorithm. And but the same thing with consensus mechanisms. There's also this question about block size, which became a big thing in the community. Like the community, the decentralized part of the community is, you know, you want developers to be fairly decentralized in the fact that you have people coming from different points of interest, and they're sort of working on different things, because the more eyes you have on the problem, the more answers you're going to solve, and the more bugs you'll patch. So let me just get into this real quick, because this can show a little bit more of the scale of decentralization while we're here. So this is a scale I put together real quick just to sort of show in the consensus mechanism, you know, there's the transaction throughput on the base layer of transactions per second, which, you know, also has to do with the blockchain size. And whenever you raise those transaction throughput, like you put more transactions on the blockchain, that's going to increase the blockchain size, and it's also going to increase the cost of validation, which is going to increase the cost of that hardware to validate the blockchain. So at that point, you know, the more you raise the size of the blockchain, quicker it's going to lead to these central points of validation. And that's one of the problems we're trying to avoid in Bitcoin. And we've been trying with, you know, keeping most of the transactions off chain on the second layer with the Lightning Network, and trying to do our best with keeping these base layer blocks as low as we can. And so this is where I'm saying, like, in this myriad here of the software, hardware community and the consensus mechanics, it really is a dial of an EQ of how do you get, where do you want to be? Do you want the immutability and censorship resistance of Bitcoin? Because that requires heavy decentralization on lots of different factors, and you're going to be a slow going process, and it won't be that easy to garner consensus upgrades, and you won't be able to move as quick. But I mean, this is where I think if we start digging this apart, we'll start to see more and more like problems like this. It might be problems, but we kind of see like, are we decentralized enough to answer the problem? Is it there? I mean, these are one of those hindsight 2020 things. And just because it sounds like we're still got time here, I do have one last slide where I was going to talk about these historical points of decentralization for Bitcoin, where, you know, Bitcoin was released in late 2008, early 2009 to solve a problem. And that problem had to do with trusted third parties and the way that we transacted our value. And that garnered a lot of interest from academics in the computer science and economists and cryptographers. And the Bitcoin Slashdot Wired articles also brought on a lot of investors and speculators. When the WikiLeaks Greece and Cyprus collapse happened, it brought in a lot of political and banking refugees. The creation of Silk Road, which is the first darknet market, created a community that was like just a myriad of people that were all sort of there for different reasons. And then there was the Silk Road collapse, which that actually brought in speculators from the government, which, you know, not necessarily the most legit individuals, that's to say the truth. I mean, but I mean, new investors with that collapse as well, when people started to see the price hit a point where they thought they could buy back in and make money. And then with the SegWit implementation and the scaling war that lasted a couple of years, with the ending with the UASF and the Bcash hard fork, brought on so much media attention that it definitely brought in new speculators and investors. And these sort of things are what sort of add up to, you know, to the decentralization of Bitcoin, to where we do keep moving forward in the scale, to where Bitcoin, I would always say, is probably at the furthest end of decentralization, even though we do have some errors in the system that we're still working out and trying to figure out where the best level is for that. Because, I mean, if we just go all out decentralization on, I mean, it just isn't going to work. Everybody's going to speak different languages. Everybody's not going to be, there's certain aspects that we have to at least specialize to where we could work together to achieve what we're trying to achieve here with blockchains and Bitcoin and decentralization. And I think really that is censorship resistance and immutability. And that's one of those that it really does take a lot of different aspects of the system to be built out enough to where it's robust, and it's hard to change that system. And yeah, so that's my quick presentation. It sounds like I didn't even get to the 10 minutes yet, but sorry about that. But so let me do this, if I can stop screen share. All right. So
that was excellent, Rick. Thank you. I'm going to give you a round of applause.
All right, appreciate it, guys. So yeah, like, this is a topic we need to slice into on a lot of different levels. That was just like a real quick, you know, breeze into a couple aspects. We need to look at a lot of it.
I had one question. I didn't really understand the government speculators on the Silk Road when you talked about it collapsing. Like, what? Can you talk about that just a little bit more detail? I didn't understand what you meant.
Corrupt officials that basically wanted to leverage the system for their own personal networks, like, you know, corrupt DEA agents that might be, you know, running drug rings and things like that. And it's one of those situations where a lot of those people weren't really aware of the censorship resistance factor and the way that the way that they can route around stuff to where they can hide and obfuscate their value transactions a little bit better if they know what they're doing. And that's one of those things where when that happened, we did start to see government creeping in to the point to where now we do have a Bitcoin in the hands of politicians. And I mean, it's one of those situations where, you know, once it starts getting into people's hands, they start thinking about the value of it in a different way. And eventually that either leads to someone that says it's worth something or not. And so those people that do come in and think it's worth something, usually they're going to try and leverage the system. And those law enforcement officials that were working the Silk Road case weren't exactly the best cast of characters to understand that.
That's interesting. Anybody else out there have any questions for Rick?
Yeah, I was wondering, what do you see as like major events that may happen like this year, 2019? People that are like excited about, you know, different aspects of the space. And you didn't mention anything about the Bitcoin and the Bitcoin like cash split. Do you see there being any repercussions from that coming into the year?
Honestly, I think that's kind of piddling out at this point with the Bcash fork. I think really as far as things that are going to be notable this year for decentralization will probably be, the most important will be the Lightning Network and the implementations that come up with that, to where people could actually like onboard into Bitcoin without actually ever needing to buy Bitcoin. And they can, I really think that we're going to start seeing Bitcoin and this censorship resistant money function for censored markets to the point to where, you know, it'll just kind of be one of these things where, you know, here in Colorado, cannabis is a censored market, and there's a lot of people that work in the cannabis industry. And if we could start onboarding a percentage of that industry, there's a good reason for other merchants in the area to start accepting that. And that could be a big boost for decentralization. I'm really interested in the Lightning Network. I don't know exactly what the event will be. I honestly think some more interesting events in seeing decentralization is some of the fallout we're seeing from the prolonged bear market, where we're starting to see more 51% attacks, and we're starting to see Ethereum really try to make a move to scale, and maybe we might see another fork there, and we might see Ethereum sort of fracture a little bit and become more decentralized in certain aspects. And it's always hard to say, because it's always like a hindsight 2020 and usually a reaction to a problem. And we never really know how quick the reaction is going to be or how big the problem is. And because usually the system will just keep functioning if it can. But, you know, if something comes up, we might see a lot of people make a quick move one way or another. So it's really hard to gauge on these things, but I would say the Lightning Network overall.
Hey, Rick, I'm really glad you mentioned the Lightning Network. My question would be, what do you see like being the potential killer apps, you know, coming out this year, possibly on the Lightning Network? Is there any community projects out there that are currently working on some really cool application uses for Lightning?
Yeah, I think honestly some of the most interesting aspects are some of the collaborative stuff going together. I mean, I don't really see that as being the big mass appeal for Lightning. I think it's just interesting to see some of the like Satoshi's Place put together, and some of these like chain transactions where people are sending microscopic amounts of Bitcoin, and then somebody else adds some and sends it. And I mean, there's a lot of community building projects going on within the developer community and the power users. But I think really the most killer app within Lightning that I'm intrigued about the most is the aspect of people being able to onboard into Bitcoin without really having to enter the system. They can actually just function on that second layer without having to really go into the base layer. Because, you know, that's one of the things that I think it's just that base layer has to have some slow organic growth where the people that are coming in understand the system. And if we ever really do want some sort of mass adoption, it's going to have to take an ability for people to enter and exit the system without having to, that large barrier of entry of, okay, what is money? What is governance problems? What is the economic problems? How are we going to figure all this out? I mean, we need people to be able to just say like, okay, here's some Lightning Network. This is some tokens in a channel. It's going to close this. You're going to handle this transaction, and then you'll be out of Bitcoin as quick as you entered. And I know there's some questions there about trust and whether or not you could actually trust that. And I mean, like, I think that's also one of these scales where, it's not going to be as trustless as the base layer for sure. But I think this is where, when you have these interesting networks of businesses, like a censored market like cannabis, where there's these different pools together, you could get them to work together and make sure that trust is still there. And it's kind of hard to say how exactly that's going to work completely, but I would say that's what I'm most interested in with Lightning is getting people into the system without having to have that full barrier to entry of understanding what they're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent, Rick. Okay. Anybody else? I think we should move on to the next one because I think we're ready to get going to.
I got one more quick.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I got one more quick question.
Sure.
Do you think that the core implementation of Bitcoin has moved into the lion's share of the market as far as percentage of nodes go due to the perceived decentralization of the Bitcoin core GitHub repository and the number of contributors actually putting work towards that?
I mean, honestly, I think it's probably the greater percentage just because it's the easiest to spin up and work. I mean, like, I think the greater part of economic nodes are actually using different implementations because, they want that extra level of trustlessness where, like, I don't have to trust all the core developers and what they've added to the code. I could trust Bitcoin Knots or Libitcoin or, I think that's probably like a larger percentage of economics on the chain. But I mean, like, really, like we're saying, I mean, Bitcoin core is 96%. I'm sure it counts for a good percentage, but a lot of Bitcoin activity does have to do with trying to still, obfuscate transactions, and a big part of that is sort of running your own implementation and sort of having RPC clients sort of bounce back to Bitcoin. And so I think that's where most of the economics is, but that's still just speculation. I mean, I think core is just the greater percentage because it's just the easiest to download, spin up, and sync up with least amount of bugs. You got the most developers working on it. I mean, those other guys, it's like you got to hire a personal developer and be like, okay, you're a Bitcoin Knots guy. And I mean, like, that's something where, there's not many Bitcoin Knots guys out there. So it's like you got to almost pay for the development on that. And so you're doing that for a reason, most likely because there's a lot of value in your transactions.
Hey, Rick, can you tell us how we can get in touch with you? I know you mentioned your podcast earlier. I'd love to hear about that. And before we move on, thank you again. It was a great presentation.
Sure.
Really appreciate it.
It's the podcast is called Block Digest on YouTube. And you can reach me on Twitter at CryptoRick. And I'm also in the Colorado Blockchain Slack and, running that meetup. And just those are the main places for right now. But I guarantee there's some more stuff coming down the line.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Thank you very much.
Appreciate
All right. Next up, we're going to hear from Bain, Tyler Bain, and he's going to talk to us about Bitcoin network and energy consumption. So if you'd like to take it over and share your screen, Tyler, go ahead. Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Super happy to be here. Excited to share my thoughts on the Bitcoin network energy consumption. I'm sure we've all heard or seen articles, claiming that Bitcoin's going to boil the ocean or that its network consumption is just, ever climbing and is going to be some incredible environmental disaster sometime in the near future or now, depending on perspective. So I just kind of wanted to touch on some of that, where some of that comes from. Some of it's warranted, maybe others of it not. So doing a quick presentation on the Bitcoin energy consumption for the network level. I went to local school of mines, and I work as an electrical engineer for a local power company. So I have a little bit of expertise, I guess, in the area. I thought I'd really like to share. The first thing I want to talk about is the two different methodologies that you can come across to actually get to an ending network consumption. And most of the ones I've seen cite an energy per year, which itself is a very difficult number to come across and wrap your head around. There's two approaches. There's the economic-based calculation, which is the very highly cited, the one you see most of the major media companies quoting in their articles is this economic-based calculation, but there's also a physics-based calculation, one that looks at maybe more easily definable units on like the base layer protocol. So the economic-based calculation starts at a number of Bitcoin generated per day, and they derive that from on-chain data from the Bitcoin network, and they then assume a Bitcoin dollar value for, and then they essentially withdraw how many dollars the miners across the globe are receiving, and then they then turn and estimate what those miners are paying for electricity, which can be problematic. Electricity prices vary across the globe, and so it's really hard to find that number, and that number doesn't really exist because it varies between miners. And then they take that number and multiply it by a percentage of miners' operational expenses, which they assume to be about 60, which is again, an incredible assumption, a leap of faith to take to say that those mining operations put 60% of their daily revenue into electricity. It could be much less at 5%, or it could be even more, above 150%. So it's just a two kind of arbitrary numbers that they then withdraw out and benchmark it to a kilowatt hour per year. However, I would argue that the physics-based calculation is more grounded in reality. You can measure the blocks that are produced per day, and from that number you can derive a hashes per second, the proof of work algorithm being pointed towards that chain, and then from there you can actually estimate bounds. The assumption is what those miners are consuming joules per terahash, which is just one assumption, both of which the bounds are known. So you can get an upper and lower case bounds for what the network could be consuming, optimally, and then the other side of it would be the maximum type consumption. And then you can pull from that joules per terahash data and that terahash per second data, you can actually just convert that directly into power and energy with time. And so I would say that might be a better calculation, and I'm going to walk through a couple examples as to why that would be the case. The economic variety is what's highly cited in the national media and what you find replicated across many various news sites. And unfortunately, it's kind of founded in some lack of knowledge on reality, I would argue. They assume that 60% of the network or 60% of the miners' revenue is put towards electricity. They also assume 5 cents per kilowatt hour, which it can vary anywhere from 2 cents to 15 cents. So those numbers are really hard to nail down, especially on a global scale. And so the graph here is actually from the highly cited Digiconomist, who a lot of these news articles are citing for their consumption values, and it shows projected into the 2019 year, this month actually, that the network would consume 125 terawatt hours per year, which is a whole boatload of energy and is equivalent per Wikipedia of the consumption of Norway. So quite a bit of energy consumption is what they're claiming based upon these economic calculations. They're essentially saying Bitcoin miners could afford to consume this much electricity. However, I think that's maybe unfounded. The physics-based calculation is a little bit more based in reality. Here is a graph of the hashes per second on the network from its inception until about 2 years ago is what's shown here on the left. But as you can see, the joules per gigahash, as marked here on the bottom, is consistently going down as ASIC chips become more efficient and more capable over time. And so if you look at the bounds on the Bitcoin network as far as minimum and maximum as far as available hardware, state-of-the-art versus the most inefficient, the lower bound would be about 14 or so terahashes, but maybe the upper bound would be a little bit higher. But but on average, given those two bounds, you could kind of assume that most of the network has, or a good portion of the network is upgraded to the most recent mining hardware, and to stay profitable. And so they're at about 18.4 terawatt hours per year. So just a comparison of those two calculations, kind of to put them into like more local terms, to a digestible number. The economic-based calculations claim anywhere from 5 to 14 gigawatts of instantaneous power consumption, which translates to about 50 to 125 terawatt hours a year, which on the order of magnitude is about how much generation the state of Colorado has available to it. So all the power plants in the state, regardless of source, add up to about that threshold. Whereas the physics-based calculation only amounts to about 1 to 4 gigawatts of instantaneous consumption, which relates to about 15 to 27 terawatt hours a year. And that can be more easily related to like the Denver metro area. And so the key takeaway, I think, is that the economics-based calculations can be anywhere from 2 to 10 times greater than the actual network consumption, or at least what the network consumes based upon physics and based upon reality. A couple studies I want to note that back up that claim. I'm part of this Electric Power Research Institute through the day job, and in the middle of 2018, they're like a consortium of different electric utilities compile their resources into this institute, and then this institute generates data. And so this past year, they did a Bitcoin energy consumption study as seen on the electric grid. And I think the important couple takeaways from their study is that Bitcoin consumes maybe only about 1/10 of what the global data centers powering the internet consume. And so oftentimes you see newspaper or news media articles produced that claim, that Bitcoin's an ecological disaster that's going to destroy ecosystems, but you never see those claims towards the internet, which is consuming about 10 times the amount. And another key takeaway, I think, is that the Bitcoin mining efficiency for these ASIC chips is about doubling every year. So in 2014, it was about 500 joules per terahash. And actually today, in 2018, 2019, I guess, you can buy an ASIC miner off the shelf that'll consume about 40 to 60 joules per terahash, depending. So you can see that this trend is going to continue. It has been continuing. And these miners are getting more efficient, able to do more hashes per second with less energy, every day. So it's a pretty interesting Moore's law. It's showing Moore's law in effect essentially with those ASIC chip efficiencies. And that's the EPRI study. And another study I think is noteworthy that also confirms and validates, I guess, the physics-based calculations is the University of Cambridge recently released their global crypto asset benchmarking report. And this was released in December 2018. It's a little more recent data. But essentially, this yellow line is when the EPRI study was performed. And this number actually coincides perfectly with EPRI's data. That yellow band is the upper and lower bounds of what the Bitcoin network is consuming. And so I think specifically that this kind of validates a lot of those claims. And it's done, interestingly enough, this is released by the University of Cambridge Judge Business School. So it is kind of from a bunch of, economics nerds that invalidates the previous economic study. And then I kind of wanted to round it off with I hear my buzzer there. Quick comparison of the Bitcoin energy consumption costs, like economically, environmentally, and socioeconomically against some of the alternatives. And so, it's using quite a bit less more than the paper currency system, the gold mining and recycling system, and the banking system. And so I think that's an important contrast, is that Bitcoin's able to do this with fractions of the energy expended on some of the traditional systems. And in the future, it's going to incentivize renewable energy because it's essentially a bounty system globally to find the cheapest, most affordable, adequately available and excess energy, essentially. And so as you can see, that same study cites that a lot of these a lot of these mining farms are actually sourcing their stuff from renewables. And here's a quick page of my works cited, some of the data used to compile this report. But thanks for the time. Sorry for going over. Really appreciate it, though.
No problem. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Any questions?
Yeah, I was wondering, maybe you answered it towards the end, but thank you for the interesting information. I had no idea that there was two measurements like that, and that they could be so far, differing as far as the scale. When you talked about something being described as a statewide usage versus a citywide usage, that's crazy. But who should we be listening to, I guess is my question. Where's the outlets? You mentioned that one survey at the beginning, the study at the beginning that was the most cited, and then you mentioned this Cambridge one at the end. Do you think that's going to take hold, and the alternate viewpoint, the physics-based, is going to be something that we can look forward to seeing more in the future? Or do you think that the economic one still has a hold of the way that things are being measured?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a good answer. I had to, there's 4 or 5 different entities that have done some energy type studies. But yeah, unfortunately, the mainstream media really likes citing that Digiconomist one because it shows that Bitcoin's consuming, incredible amounts, and it kind of goes along with that narrative. And unfortunately, I mean, it's kind of like the case with all news these days. You have to really dig to the primary source of some of that information. And most of those mainstream news articles, even CoinDesk and some of the other very popular crypto news sources, they continually cite some very questionably sourced information, not only from the Digiconomist, but also from a variety of different things. So don't trust, verify. And unfortunately, this is a really good example of where trusting could be detrimental, and verification is really necessary.
That's really important. Trust but verify. I like when you say that.
Tyler, I think that this is something that everybody should do. The Bitcoin cost versus traditional costs, that shows the comparison of economic and environmental costs for paper currency versus Bitcoin. That argument is so telling right there for that surface level high energy consumption case that a lot of people use with the economic numbers. So thanks for putting all that information together. It looks really good.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. I think, it definitely, hopefully resonates, get some of that news out there.
All right. Well, for sure, man. I think that's a great job that you're doing putting this information together, because this is one of the major points that people keep bringing up and saying, this thing's going to kill the world. And I'm curious, is you've been looking at these data points, like you're saying, I mean, the renewable energy side of things definitely yields a big margin on profit when it comes to mining Bitcoin. And also at the same time, is people developing new and more efficient ASICs. And I'm curious, do you think more Bitcoins being produced in these some of these, or do you think some of the ASIC developments working with some of the renewable energy to where these people are getting crazy good prices for Bitcoin? And where do you think the percentage of renewable energy on the network is now compared to where it'll be in a couple of years? Yeah, just curious about that whole renewable energy aspect of the network.
Yeah, absolutely. So just speaking from a purely power engineering, from as far as the grid's perspective, renewable energy is going to be increasing, orders of magnitude from where it's at today. So as the power grid cleans up, anything connected to it's going to clean up, and so that's going to include crypto mines. That's going to include your toaster at home. So there's going to be a lot of those benefits that that the crypto market's just going to receive just naturally, I guess, from the grid cleaning up. However, I think like you were saying, a lot of these monster miners, especially ASIC producers, aren't deploying it on expensive electricity. They're deploying it where there's excess, like in Quebec with their hydro. A lot of that's wasted every year when they release the water out of their dams. And so some of that already today, their energy, their electricity cost is close to zero. So part of that's due to renewables. Part of that's just due to the amount of wasted energy, as a whole, in our ecosystems. But some of that's, I think it's going to, work together. Right now, there's actually in some incentives to find some of those really cheap, as far as environmentally and economically produced electricity.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major points that I just want to, whenever people talk about proof of work burning down the world, it's like, proof of work collateralizes the cheap energy, which gives an incentive to find the most renewable energy possible, the way to create the most renewable energy possible. And I think that's one of the things where whenever people people have already started to figure that out. I mean, these cheap electricity costs, they don't last that long before people go over there and sign up contracts and that electricity is gobbled up. And, that's where I'm starting to see this as being like something that could actually help save the environment, in the fact that there's actually a value proposition to find better ways to get renewable energy resources stored and used.
Tyler, I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's the percentage that is renewable to what is basically oil-based or coal-based or petroleum-based, natural gas, whatever? So what is, like you were saying, that most of the mining operations, like say, for instance, Iceland, they're using thermal energy, and Washington State, they're using hydro, Canada hydro, blah, 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 China hydro. So do you know that percentage breakup? Because you make a great point. If this is renewable energy we're talking about, because they're based in hydro or thermal regions mostly, then a lot of this is moot, right? A lot of this argument against the energy burn, which is news to me too, because I've always been against proof of work. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's a really difficult, question to answer, because the grid varies, based on locality. That study by the University of Cambridge claims that it was about 60%, 55 to 60% of the energy being consumed by these large miners, which is the vast majority of the system, is based from renewables.
Yeah.
So that's a really large percentage. To give you some perspective, the Colorado grid locally varies anywhere from like 20 to 40% renewables, just any given day. And so, we're getting there, but perspective wise, the state of Colorado has announced some plans, I think by like 2030 or 2040, the entire grid supposedly is going to be 100% renewable. So some of that's going to improve over time, just regionally based. But I think a lot of these miners have already found it.
I'm just saying, though, that in my mind, that argument is very valid, because if you're based in a hydro region and you're utilizing hydro electricity, it really shouldn't be counted against, say, this energy consumption problem. You know what I mean? It really shouldn't.
Yeah, and it looks like, based on that study, maybe 60% of the network, shouldn't be counted if that's the metric. But I think it's good to look at just the overall numbers, regardless of where the energy is sourced from. It is energy being placed upon the network. And I don't totally believe that it's wasteful, because, individuals are choosing to utilize that energy in that fashion. And so you can't really waste something that an individual puts to a purpose.
Yeah, I guess from a conservationist point of view, they're biased as where I came from. But I think that argument, is, shifted my perspective on proof of work and the amount of consumption it consumes.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Just to shed some light on the issue. Absolutely.
One quick question. Did the projection for how much energy was going to be consumed in January 2019, were they close? Were they right? Were they wrong?
They were off by like an order of a factor of 10, I guess, is about how high they were, in my opinion. And really what they were doing is they were just saying, based upon the current price, which at that time was about $16K, they projected out that and that's where the fallacy of the economic equation and the economic way to calculate that, that it just doesn't compute. When the cost of the network drops by 80-90%, those calculations are equally skewed.
So I think on that point, I have maybe a very quick request, comment, and question. So when you're talking about the uncertainty here, it seems like this wildly arbitrary, at least in my mind, 60% like revenue stream or something along the lines. That
Absolutely.
seems to be the wild thing that I don't know where that's based on, what's the bounds on it. But in your analysis, I wonder a little bit about how up to date everyone's equipment is. Like how fast are you refreshing? So that seems to me like something I'd love to see some more bounds on in the future. But obviously your data is matching more with what we're seeing out in the world, which is great. And then I guess a comment which leads into the question, you said something about toasters being powered in the future by renewables. But like everything on the grid, why not using some of that mining power to do something like that? So we talked a little bit about like the cannabis industry here, for instance. It's like using waste heat for something better. I think we can see some of that come online. But I guess this is the question. So it's that now we have these constant hashing rate that's going on. Basically, we're trying to pump this as much as we can at the lowest possible price. So these things should be always on. But as we see in renewables, it's the load balancing, the dynamic load that really can get you the price point that you want. In fact, you'll get paid to burn electricity in some points, I know, in the market. So is there a vision that we could potentially see for proof of work mining that's much more dynamic? So that based on spot price, we might see the hash, the difficulty even, jump around to try and match that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I haven't seen, like you're saying, a lot of these miners like to be on 24/7 to attempt to find those blocks. But in today's like Colorado local electric markets, there's multiple tiers of rate structures that allow people to essentially demand response. It allows the utility to say, hey, this is a peak period. Electricity is extra expensive. If you're going to run through it, you're going to have this penalty, or we'll pay you to drop off this much. And so, like you're saying, you could have negative electric rates in some of those periods. And so, and like you mentioned, the solar stuff, other renewables like wind, and it's variable. It's never consistent. And that's what Bitcoin loads are, is they're very consistent, very high load factor, constant type consumptions. And so, some of those are at odds, but at the same time, they're easily dispatchable, and you could shed that load if absolutely necessary from a grid perspective. So, yeah, I think a lot of that's going to increase, as far as like some of that dynamic nature in the distributed loads. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's definitely people using that waste heat in interesting ways already, and you're right on about that. I mean, like, there's definitely things we could do with some of the, some of the waste coming from the mining industry.
All right, excellent presentation, Tyler. I really appreciate the information that you provided.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for
how can people get in touch with you? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm in the Colorado blockchain Slack. I'm on Twitter at Bain, and I do a Bitcoin and beer meetup in the Denver area at Denver Beer Company on Tuesdays. So if anybody's around, wants to chat Bitcoin, grab a couple brews, we'll definitely be there.
Excellent. Thank you again.
You too.
All right. Next up, it's Tommy Cox, and I'm really looking forward to this one because I think we have a shared interest. His presentation will be about decentralized autonomous meritocracies. So take it away, Tommy.
Thank you, Will. All right, let's get this pulled up. All right, yeah, thanks again for having me. Like Will mentioned, I'm talking about decentralized autonomous meritocracies, reputation democracies on the blockchain. And you'll notice I highlighted these letters. I'll endearingly refer to these as dammits from here on out. So kind of like an overview of how this is going to go. It's going to be a couple like long-winded definitions and going over like who this might apply to. And then we'll try to clarify those definitions of what a daemon is and how it functions. And then we'll dive into one of the extensions of that can apply to your decentralized organization. And that's more for the sake of brevity. There's other extensions that will also be developed for the project. So kind of an overview of the motivation behind this is I think we're approaching a zeitgeist opportunity in the Colorado blockchain community to utilize a DAO framework and really like give it the first opportunity to really test it. In Colorado blockchain, we have a lot of various meetups that could potentially utilize this. And it could also, you know, be utilized across the world to cultivate similar communities. So what are we even talking about here? What is a reputation democracy? So, and again, some like really big term definitions. It's a flat hierarchy, liquid democracy, in the sense that you're kind of delegating your votes to the more meritorious individuals. That facilitates its constituents' ability to earn a consequential voice by associating one's accrued reputation with their voting weight in organizational decision-making processes. Okay. So how are we going to accomplish this? The idea is to create an automated platform for incentivized collaboration by mode of gamified participation, enabling governments in an accessible, transparent, and entertaining fashion by utilizing bounties, something pretty popular here in Colorado with Gitcoin, reputation, and skills tracking, where participants neither need to know each other or trust one another to work towards the agreed upon objectives of an organization. So who does this apply to? And the answer is really like any organization. It could benefit any sort of hierarchical organization where you have these kind of corruptions or maybe like inefficiencies to the bureaucracies. Some examples being co-ops, labor unions. Like a co-op could be like, say, a farming co-op that maybe like needs to make a decision of like what piece of equipment to buy next season to assist the community as a whole. Gaming clans, like making decisions as to how the clan functions. Meetup groups, kind of maybe like deciding future presenters for a meetup. Peer-to-peer insurance pools, I think would be a really cool application that we still have yet to see in the blockchain space. Things like collaborative blogging platforms. Steam, I think, kind of has a already reputation-based sort of interface that you can get inspiration from. But there's an infinite amount of possibilities where this could apply. So our first persona is Meetup Mark. Mark's a Colorado blockchain meetup organizer and attendee. He frequently hosts and attends meetups, but he finds it difficult to lock down reliable volunteers to record his meetups and lacks the equipment and know how to do it himself. He'll also often post events in Slack. So if we were to look at like Mark's profile of the skills that he's developed in the realm of his community, which are like skills that his community deems valuable. He hosts meetups quite often. He attends meetups even more, but he doesn't really like have the know-how to like say maybe help record meetups. So his like volunteering skills a little bit lower, and that could also be used maybe like as a signal that maybe Mark could use some assistance from another individual who maybe has developed a skill more, and then he somewhat posts in Slack, and that's boosting his marketing skill here. In a different realm of things, we have Gamer Gabby, who focuses mostly on battling and occasionally goes on quests or raids with their clan, So she finds that the raids the leaders choose are often raids she's not really interested in, and she may not really have a voice in the matter. So in these cases, she'll idly farm and earn materials for the clan. So we'll notice, her raid skills are very low because she's like not really interested in the raids that like the few leaders of her clan deem that that's the raids that they're going to do. While she contributes much more to the community in doing like player versus player battles or quests and farming. So how do we solve this? Like, how does this all come together? So the idea here is colonies, which bridges the gap between reputation and democracy. The idea being, members earn reputation, and with that, that's the weight of their vote and decision making in their community. So going back to like the instance of Gabby, if she's contributing a lot to the community in other ways, maybe she should also have a bigger voice in saying what raids they get to go on, per se. So this could also be utilized to resolve issues such as like funds allocation and distribution of the community, such as going back to saying like, what piece of equipment should we buy for next farming season? Future raid destinations, like I mentioned with Gabby, charter direction, like defining the goals and objectives of your organization, or a kind of like even more interesting use case, in my opinion, would be maybe having like a token curated registry of like Biddle-a-thon speakers, maybe say for Youth Denver, where the community puts up their weighted reputation towards speakers that they would want to see speak at Youth Denver, as opposed to it maybe being like unilaterally selected by the higher ups. So, so how does this function? How does this work? So what is this evolutionary feedback loop of a dammit? So it all starts with like creating tasks, creating these bounties. Either the organization will create tasks based upon proposals by the community, or members with money can just like create a task that they deem valuable that they want other workers to complete. Then workers are able to go fulfill these tasks and earn that money, and also gain reputation based upon how efficiently they complete this task. There's kind of a commit reveal review process between the task owner and the worker, kind of reviewing each other on how well the task was completed between the two parties. And another way to earn reputation would be to just kind of like participate in decision making and discussion, like maybe like in your community chat protocols such as Slack, or moving like things forward in GitHub, or like on your project management boards such as Trello. Just kind of like being involved in progressing the organizational goals. So once you've earned reputation, you're able to stake that reputation towards proposals, towards the organizational direction, or maybe again, like for distribution of funds, whatever sort of proposal you can think of or that would affect the community as a whole. You would stake your reputation against that, and then members of the community as a whole are able to vote against these proposals. Once the voting period ends, the community then implements these passing proposals. The failing proposals go away. The proposers of the failing proposals actually lose their stake in the proposal. And then the community upgrades. They implement these proposals, lather, rinse, repeat. So taking a look at, a possible extension, these again are kind of like optional to implement in your organization, but this one specifically seems like it'll be a pretty common use case, is having membership dues. So I hear my timer going off, but this is right at the end of it, so I'll wrap it up quickly here. Having membership dues allows the organization to gather these funds to be able to accomplish, organizational goals, end goals. Maybe it's funding some of these bounties of tasks that need to be accomplished in the community, maybe like create a new Colorado blockchain site, is worth a certain amount of money to the community. They would, set up a proposal to distribute funds to start a bounty for such. So this is actually a project that I'm currently working on, and have a pretty ambitious launch schedule here. As you can see, East Denver, I plan on developing a lot of these developing the Aragon and Colony app connection and extensions. And then over the next few months, developing some third-party integrations, maybe with like chat softwares like Slack, and maybe like some in-game bots as well to monitor reputation and assign reputation automatically. Then we'll release, beta test, and hopefully eventually launch at the end of summer.
That was excellent, Tommy.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know if my last slide is going to come or not.
Oh, you got one more slide? Okay, go.
Well, it's just my thank you slide.
Oh, sure.
Apparently, you guys are not thanked. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Denver DAO, cool.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like using this idea of Denver DAO as a sandbox for all of these ideas. That's kind of where all the code will be posted. I'll open up some like meta issues there as well to maybe discuss on a higher level how the game theory and token economics of these various organizational structures can function. So yeah, find me there. Thank you.
Tommy, this is really cool. So I know that we have kind of talked about this in this general sense of like, how can we make Colorado blockchain and generally communities better? And I'm really excited to see that you're doing so much work towards this and on this. So my question though is, can we bootstrap this? Like obviously this is taking some of your time. You want to build bounties on this thing. Is there a way that you can maybe get a patron or Patreon, however you say it, set up so that we can help you and help others maybe make this thing work?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be really great. I think, like setting up a Gitcoin grant, I think is the most comparable block alternative to Patreon. Patreon being this oppressive, like, silencer and censor. But this is the first time I've really organized these thoughts and put them down on paper to be like presentable as a pitch. So I think now we can kind of like take that to these various venues, such as Gitcoin grants, and maybe some other grant venues to get this funded and bootstrapped.
Yeah, so we should talk offline. There's definitely some really important things moving along in this respect. So absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, really appreciate the presentation too. And I was just going to ask, I saw in there you had a DAMIT, a D-A-M-I-T. Like, what was that? I didn't catch that in the presentation.
Yeah, so I'll go back to the beginning real quick. It's just the ITS in Meritocracies. So Decentralized, Autonomous, Meritocracies.
Nice. So I know that in the Colorado blockchain, in the blockchain Slack, we've talked about this before when it comes to words and definitions and everything. And I'm just like curious why does autonomous keep coming up whenever it's like, I understand like we're decentralizing these systems, but it just seems like the autonomous side of things, it's like there's still, permission systems and people deciding on what to do. I mean, like that's where my only hang up comes in the wording on the idea of like autonomous thrown in all of these, DAX, DAOs, and damn it. So, like, I mean, it's just like autonomous always pops up. And, it's like really hard to figure out how we're going to get actually like autonomous systems working, for multiple reasons. And I'm just like, just curious, like why we can't like, push more towards like, these are DEX, like decentralized communities, or because like I know DEXs, like decentralized exchanges, like that's kind of the new lingo instead of decentralized autonomous exchanges, or I don't know. I'm just thinking the wording on things, like I'm failing to see the autonomous portion of things. Maybe you can point me in that where I'm failing to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I 1,000% agree with that sentiment that a lot of these systems that we're calling DAX or DAOs or DAMs or taxes, I don't know, whatever you want. They lack that kind of autonomy, or they're like taking for granted, calling like, hey, it's on the blockchain. That's like automating my the security or something. So I've tried like really hard, and I agree that, you know, like it's still somewhat kind of a joke to some extent, but I've tried really hard with this to extend as much autonomy as possible in the third-party app integrations. I think is what it's going to come down to, where like you'll have these, say, kind of like a karma bot or a chat bot that lives in your Slack rooms monitoring conversations. Maybe someone gives you like a thumbs up or something, and it recognizes that, and it assigns you this reputation in the background. A lot of these systems like are going to have to be tested. They could be easily gamed per se, but I was really hoping to focus on the autonomy when it comes down to this in these third-party integrations. So like maybe like monitoring the meetup.org API for like when meetup is created by this individual, give them some reputation. There will be these background processes always kind of monitoring and watching and looking to assign participation without any need for like human intervention to assign this reputation. With that said, there's obviously going to be a ton of places where human intervention is necessary, especially when it comes to the tasks. You know, you're going to have someone reviewing tasks to make sure that they're complete. You can't just have machines do that. I don't think that'll ever really be autonomous. I don't know. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well, like DUMS without the A. So that's why.
Yeah, I get you, man. It's one of those things where it's like I was saying in that it's like a sliding scale, and there's definitely, you know, something here to where like governance can be distributed in a way to where it's more efficient for certain aspects of like you're saying, Colorado Blockchain Slack or a website or, you know, meetups. And yeah, I think it's a lot of just, you know, getting the lingo right for explanations to where like we're all on the same page, to where people are like, okay, I get what you're building, to where like a couple of words sometimes can throw people, especially that word decentralized. It's one of those where it's just like, as soon as you throw that out there, they're like, okay, I think I know what that means. But, you know, and then so I don't know, the whole language aspects of stuff, I think once we get that cleared up, we can really make some progress on this and headway. But
yeah, that's definitely duly noted. I think the whole like damn it thing is almost, you know, trying to like play on that and, you know, maybe say like, hey, let's take the acronym less seriously and look at the content of it.
Right.
But you know, that's not totally clear, obviously.
Hey Tommy, this is Will. I know I saw you last week at a meetup that was from this organization or this project called Native in Denver, and I wondered if you had any perspective on that. It seems like it's covering much of the same territory, or if it has a different aspect to it. Did you get any perspective on that from when you were there? I know I saw you last week and talked to you a bit.
Yeah, I think we're actually covering a lot of similar aspects, and that's why I was really excited to go and chat with the Native guys. And I think I had hoped, or I had certain kind of ideas built up around how they had potentially built their system, and was actually somewhat disappointed in hearing like how their system was actually built. I hope none of those guys are on the call right now, but they'll probably watch it later.
So one comment on that, actually, I met with Jake, who's the founder there today.
Yeah.
And, there's actually a lot more going on than just you see in the white paper right now. So stay tuned. I think Native has a lot of good things coming up, but we'll find out. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I read their white paper too. It's interesting too. I would recommend taking a look if you haven't.
So that was the thing, is like I read their white paper really thoroughly, and that's why I got really excited about their organization. But when I talked to Jake, it turns out like they took like a hard left turn somewhere, and they're not really like on the same roadmap anymore. So a lot of what's in the white paper, I don't think accurately reflects kind of where they're currently at and the direction they're going per se. With that said, I've kind of like taken the concept and implemented it in what I feel is like leveraging best practice, like other projects in the community that are really far along with what Native may be trying to accomplish. And I'm just kind of like riding on the shoulders of giants, putting these pieces together and amalgamating them and marrying them in that sense. So really, I take very little credit. I'm just kind of like taking other projects that have like succeeded at employing these systems already and putting the pieces together.
Along those lines, you know, that kind of leads into my question. You mentioned a little bit of the tokenomics and stuff. Is there some materials that other people could kind of research, or you research to prepare some of these ideas, or are a lot of this your unique ideas? Like, just, is there anything that you kind of would steer other people that were kind of interested in these topics to look at?
Yeah, so a lot of these ideas derive directly from the structure of the two organizations that this project is based upon, and that's Aragon and Colony. Aragon being more of the voting and governance mechanisms, and they themselves employ this this governance mechanism with like protocol updates with weighted voting in their own community, and Colony being more of the reputation, skills, and task side of the equation. And Jack DeRose, the founder of Colony, he's been at this for about 5 years, but really it's just kind of like a culmination of his philosophies of how a decentralized autonomous organization best functions, like in tokenomics wise. So I would first look into Jack DeRose and then maybe dig deeper into the Aragon governance protocol.
Excellent. That was a great presentation, Tommy. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with at ETH Denver. It sounds like a great project that you got going on.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Can you stop sharing your screen, actually, so we can move on to Dan Shields, and another one that I'm really looking forward to, and I saw a bit about it, ProtoSchool Denver, but I'm going to let Dan take it over and fill us in about it. Thanks a lot, Dan. Let us know what's up.
Dan, you're muted.
Yeah, seems like you might be muted, Dan.
There we go.
All right, that sounds
Sorry
good.
about that.
No problem. Looks good.
Okay, let me get started over here, y'all. So what I'd like to talk to you all about today is IPFS and friends. And by IPFS and friends, I mean friends as in people, and also friends as in projects that are related to IPFS. And all of this is centered around really building a distributed web. And one thing I really kind of want to highlight, this is the new shiny thing, is ProtoSchool Denver. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what ProtoSchool is as we get moving along here. But I just want to let you all know that any words that I'm putting in here, for the most part, are adapted from some slides that are linked there. And Juan, the guy who's behind IPFS, did this. He has a really good talk. He puts it much more eloquently than I do in about like a 45-minute talk. So go check that out if you want something more in depth. So this is kind of what we all want. And we saw this, thank you so much for your presentation earlier, Rick, because it's this idea that we have all these centralized systems and all this coagulation of all this power and infrastructure that we really we want to break apart, break it down into something that's much closer to a really distributed, purely distributed model where everyone is on equal weight. And this is on the tech stack, maybe on the societal stack, whatever it might be, but the tech stack is really what I want to address here today. So a lot of people in the blockchain space are kind of like, they've got it in their minds that blockchain is really the solution for anything that was related to this distributed decentralized web. No, it's really not. it's a really interesting component. And I think the key to really kick this all into gear, because people have been trying to make a distributed web. I think it was really the original vision for the web. But now we can start talking about some of the ways, the infrastructure that's needed to actually make that happen. I think that's really IPFS and its friends. So kind of look at where we're at today. We say Web 2.0, people talk a lot about. So where our data, our computing power, and our network are all really centralized in so many ways. You know, we can talk about the giants of the services that we use online. They're these very centralized bodies. And all along the way to get to them, there's a very centralized pipe to talk out to them and talk back. And so there's all these walls that we've put up, all these barriers that really disconnect us in a lot of ways that I think we can break down. And so really this is kind of pointing at Web 2.0. We've done some great things, but man, it sucks for when we talk about, like, right now we're on this conversation having it on Zoom, and my slides are all on a Google server somewhere that I'm pulling from. So if for any reason the pipe that I'm going out to any of you guys or the Google servers go down, right, it might be unlikely, but all of a sudden this whole thing breaks, right? Whereas you and I, we've got these wonderful machines and all this networking infrastructure. Why can't we just talk to each other and share this amongst us? Well, Web 2.0 just doesn't allow for that to happen, right? And then, well, the other thing, maybe it's not just the servers, but what if something really hits the fan, right? Like these natural disasters, the infrastructure itself can be gone. So in a crisis, what happens when the fiber out to, you know, go and talk to some of the emergency services is now down. So building out a system in which we can have peers talk to each other is critical to try and mitigate these risks. And then, well, not only that, what about human disasters? I mean, so with all this centralized, resource, we have this ability for people to come in and surprise, oppression, cut you off of doing anything that you'd like, communicating with the world. And on the same lines, censorship, right? Being able to control what you see and how you see it. So this is all kind of really based on this centralized entity having the control. And man, like, I guess the cherry on top is this really, really awful security model. So right now, when we look at Web 2, we've got this client and the server and the pipe in between is kind of what we're looking at. And so when we look at the general structure of this, the transport may be sort of kind of authenticated, you know, SSL and those certificates. It might be sort of encrypted with HTTPS and stuff like that. But not always, and it's maybe hard to vet. So that might be okay. But again, that's one pipe between you and the outside. But then once you get your client or the server side, this gets a lot riskier, right? Like on my machine, I tend to trust that my machine is doing things right, so it's verified and it's authenticated, but it's really generally not proven, right? And the encryption there is maybe, like a lot of this stuff is on plain text on your machine, and maybe that's not a good idea. So really, this is where we come at Web 3. How can we solve all these issues? And this is talking about the distributed permanent Merkle, I'll get into in a second, web. And that's what IPFS is really after, and its friends, right? How do we make this work? So the IPFS stack, this is the friends. The fundamental level of all of this is how do we do distributed networking well, efficiently? Really, how do we do routing and networking in a mesh type configuration, which is what libp2p is mostly after. So how do we move this data around, whatever it might be? And then stack above that is talking about how do we actually define this data and then propagate it around this network, right? So this is talking about now, how do we build a Merkle DAG, which we can talk a little bit more about the technicals here in a minute, and then how do we actually name and contact and communicate with the different members and the data itself on this network. And finally, yeah, the high level, like as a user who doesn't want to talk about all this rest of this junk, how do I interact with all this data out there on the network with it being basically behind the scenes for me? And that's IPFS. So again, this is really what the content addressing is going after. And specifically in the stack, this is now talking about defining this data and IPLD, which is an IPNS. So we're talking about naming data versus me talking out into the world, right, saying, okay, example.com navigates to a particular IP address. So I'm talking about go to a location, and then from that location, specify what that file might be. So you can think of the analogy being like, if I wanted to figure out what a particular, baz.ping is here, I have to go to a particular library somewhere, and then they get to tell me where in the library I have to go and find this one only copy of this particular image, and that's how I get it, right? Versus on Web3, we'd like to say, I'd like to go out and say, okay, instead of finding a particular person, a particular place, or I want to find a particular resource anywhere on the network, wherever it might be, whoever has that. So we do content addressing or named addressing. And this is a really interesting aspect here that gets towards the Merkle-DAG nature that we're going towards, is that we can name our content in such a way that we can authenticate and verify it all in the name. So through using hashing, so we can take just any arbitrary data, put that through a hashing algorithm and generate a unique identifier for that data. So if you change one little bit of the data, it changes whatever that hash is totally, so that you can tell it's completely different. So with that, just by calling out to the data anywhere on the network, I can also instantly verify and authenticate that whatever is returned to me is actually what it's supposed to be. So that's a pretty cool way that we can make things more secure and more accessible over the network at the same time. So a visual example you can think of that it's basically me probing out to one person is how we work now amongst this huge web of very high power machines with all kinds of resources that we could potentially tap into. So why don't we do that? Why don't, instead of looking for one particular person, we look for the entire network to help me out and bootstrap whatever I would need. So that's kind of the high-level overview. And since we're kind of short on time here in this particular venue for this lightning talk, I just want to highlight to you that if you're interested in learning the more technical details of this stuff, maybe even want to play with some of the friends of IPFS down a little bit lower, or you just want to learn the basics. ProtoSchool is this really interesting initiative that's just coming out, and we are just starting the Denver chapter. So come and join us. We are on proto.school and specifically the Denver chapter. So with the rest of the time that I have here, whatever we got, I kind of wanted to show you around some of what we have. You can see these links in the slides afterwards. I think we'll put them up somewhere. But ProtoSchool is a really cool initiative here. So it's all built on tutorials, interactive tutorials that you can go live and play around with these tools and learn about them. So for anybody who's interested, check out ProtoSchool or proto.school. And if you're especially interested in the local community, maybe have some friends to work with playing around with IPFS and friends, come and join us. We're started right here, and we have specifically a GitHub repo that this is all being centered around, and potentially a website being built out if anybody wants to help me do that. And with that, I'd say thank you very much for your attention, and open up to some questions.
Excellent. Dan, this is Will. Is ProtoSchool specific to IPFS, or is it across the platform?
No. So this is as the website is pointing out, that it's self-guided interactive tutorials around anything about decentralized web concepts. So right now, you can, so the first tutorial here is talking about just kind of what we went over on a higher level. And then we can actually play with specific instances of the IPFS JS library that's out there now, which is pretty cool in itself. But I'm starting to work with this team on building out some of these tutorials and figuring out what kind of content we want. It'll be more generalized than just IPFS. It's just, you got to start somewhere, and this is where the initiative is at right now.
Cool.
Yeah, man. Just want to second on what a great presentation. And honestly, like, yeah, this IPFS and mesh networks and actually just having something as a backup for these infrastructure, the vital infrastructure, you know, is vitally important. And yeah, I'm just curious, like, God, I mean, like, it's something that I'm just really excited about here. I'm trying to figure out what exactly, I guess I'm just thinking about the concepts and everything. Like, I understand it's like mesh networks is a part of it, but I mean, we've talked about in the Slack, you know, this ability of the Blockstream satellite to be able to connect to a node outside of the hemisphere of the Earth, you know, in case something's going on terrible. And I'm wondering, like, do we have like a roadmap all the way from like, you know, we want to build out servers with renewable energy kind of here and there, but also through mesh networks with these guys also have like Go Tennis set up. And, you know, I mean, I'm almost feeling like it's like it is kind of a slow growth infrastructure project. But I mean, its importance can't be understated. I mean, like, I think that we got to do something to drive this development. Like, I mean, when it comes to the idea of DAX and DAOs and all this stuff, I mean, like something like this, you know, it's vital. I mean, like, this is something we should be working at, because you're right. I mean, 2 is terrible. It was designed for surveillance, and I mean, this is the sort of thing where, you know, if we can start looking at, you know, ZeroNet and, you know, what exactly we could do with something like Mimblewimble or any of these other things that could possibly, you know, put all this information in a Merkle root and make it more obfuscatable. It's just, yeah, this work can't be understated. I'm definitely going to check out ProtoSchool. I really appreciate the presentation. I'm going to look more into this, and yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and help you with this, because this
Yeah, sweet. Well, definitely, all the support, the better. And hopefully we can get the sub-community who's interested in playing around with these tools in the Colorado blockchain community in general to come and join us. And hopefully it'll be a way to kind of draw others in who kind of maybe are like, cryptocurrency, I don't really get it. But with decentralized web tech, like, that's just one part of the stack that I think is really something we can talk about implementing. So that's yeah, I think it's really cool. One other thing you say, like this drive to actually make this stuff work, like other people have tried, like the decentralized web stacks in general. I think that this has a lot of momentum behind it, and that's partly because of the cryptocurrencies in general. So IPFS is kind of closely linked with the Ethereum community for a lot of reasons. I think that, as well as they have one of the larger ICOs through Filecoin. So this is what's funding Protocol Labs, which is building all of that stack that I'm talking about, all the friends, and IPFS is sitting right on top. So they actually have a pretty good amount of momentum and a large dev base that's already there dedicated to this project. So that makes me really excited this might actually take flight. And there's a lot of things lining up that says maybe this is the right stack to actually try and make it work this time.
One of my questions is, do you have like patrons around this right now, or are you looking to kind of bootstrap this through the community efforts, or what are your thoughts on scaling your project?
So ProtoSchool Denver is just one chapter of ProtoSchool itself, which is hosted through Protocol Labs. So okay. Protocol Labs is actually funding and doing all of this work. I'm just one little aspect of this right now that I'd love to get more people on board for. But so I think there's 2 or 3 paid full-time devs putting together ProtoSchool, something like that, from what I've seen in some of the community calls I've been on. But they're really pushing to try and incentivize voluntarism. So getting stuff like our chapters organizing to push to try and learn to teach and maybe contribute to. So, yeah.
All right. Sounds like that sounds like that's the last. Anybody else have any questions out there for Dan?
I got one more question for you, Dan. This is Rod.
Sure, Rod.
Hey, for this IPFS stuff, do you see these projects coming up concurrently with existing projects, or is this, do you go on like a binary, you're either going to do an IPFS or the existing protocols and run stuff that way, or is it better to, if you wanted to do it, throw it on there and do it at the same time?
So different projects as an alternative to IPFS and what IPFS is trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that IPFS is just really the application layer, and the libp2p is kind of the more interesting thing that I hope becomes more universal, in the sense that this is the network stack. Like, how do you make all of this generally work, where IPFS is really just the user interface, right? So I think that the answer is very much that like a lot of these things can start gelling together. It's not the only solution. Hopefully we see a lot more collaboration, and it's not just IPFS is the only thing, you know?
Okay, I got you blended. Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dan. That was a great presentation. I'm totally stoked by what you're doing with that, and looking forward to see developments. I guess that brings us to the end of the lightning talks section of the meetup, but I also want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to make any announcements that they would like to. I know next month is a big month in Denver as far as some things happening, so I want to give people a chance to talk about their meetup, if they're an organizer, or hackathons that are coming, jobs, news, anything that you want to put out there to the community. Here's a good time to do it, and just jump on in there if you have an idea. Go ahead.
I'll take it first. I'm hosting a Neo Colorado meetup this Friday. We're going to be taking a look into Neo's path to network decentralization. I'm aware that it's a Friday evening, so it won't go for too long. It'd be great to see some of you folks there.
Awesome. Well, I've got a meetup as well going on the 31st, 10 days from today at the Boulder Public Library. We're going to have a veteran from the trading industry speaking. His name is Bill Mallers. He's definitely, comes from the Chicago School of Economics, and he's going to talk about, a little bit of what it means to be living the trade and all that, which it's a topic we really don't talk much about at the Boulder Valley Bitcoin meetup. So it should be interesting if you have some sort of questions about Bitcoin trading or interested in trading with Bitcoin. I would suggest you come listen to what this guy's got to say or ask a question or two. Should be an interesting discussion. Anybody else with the announcements?
Sure, I got one. So tomorrow night, I don't know what you guys are up to, but we've got this great presenter, in my opinion, Greg Foss, who's coming out. So let me pull this up so you can see the link here.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
So if you go and check out Denver Blockchain, we've got Greg Foss coming here, and we'll be at SecureSet in Denver. So I'd love to have you join us. I think it'll be a really fun event in general. So go check out Meetup for that. And the other thing is, obviously, ETH Denver is next month, you guys. I think this is, in my mind, one of the premier events to bring people here and just talk blockchain, not just Ethereum. It's like anything really even beyond that. Decentralized web. Like, I think it's going to be a really exciting time to be here. I think like 1,400 people roughly now are signed up, and I think there will be more coming, which is pretty amazing. We're going to fill that place up. But the other thing that was just announced today is we have BITL Week. It's going to be open source and community driven. So if you have an event or an idea you'd like to, just basically, you can think of it like a startup week. If you've been involved in Denver Startup Week or Boulder Startup Week, where ETH Denver's the bigger thing, but these community contributed events, the BITL Week is really going to be, in my opinion, where this is going to be at. Is we can all, I know there's a few different talks and workshops I'd like to host, but let me know, because if you guys are interested, especially here at Enterprise, I know we're going to have co-working every day, and running some events concurrently with that on kind of a small scale would be great. And if you want to do something bigger, I'd love to help. So, yeah.
Excellent. I'm back. I got knocked off. Anybody? Tommy, do you want to say, did you talk about the crypto party?
We have like something tentatively planned that I was trying to look up, but I can't find any like certain details. I want to say on the 13th of next month. We're partnering with another meetup at Hooked on Colfax, I think around 7 o'clock. That's all the details I can pull off the top of my head. So keep an eye out for further notices from the Denver Crypto Party.
I got a quick announcement about this coming Wednesday at ETH Boulder. I know that my good friend Drew from Archer Tax Group is giving a presentation on taxes, and hopefully you all made a ton of money, even in a down market. And if there's any tax issues, he's super knowledgeable and he's really a personable guy. And he always brings a good presentation, even if it's a topic that's not the most exciting and sexy one in the dev space. So big shout out to Drew and ETH Boulder. Yeah, ETH Boulder meetup on Wednesday.
I will second the shout out for Drew. He's a friend of Decentralized, and he's spoken at our meetup before. So yeah, he's a wealth of knowledge. So I would recommend checking him out if you haven't seen Drew before.
I would third that as well.
Cool.
And that's Drew Kernowski in Boulder, Longmont, Colorado, tax specialist in the cryptocurrency space.
Jesus, it's like a Drew Love Fest.
Chill.
I'm going to see Drew on Wednesday.
I think I'm going to tell him Peter doxed him. No, seriously, I just want to, I'll be there. It's going to be a good time. And Will, appreciate you getting us all together here for this, man. This has been an awesome little discussion.
Awesome. I'm totally glad you guys came. Thank you for presenting. I want to thank you to all the presenters. You all did a great job. I enjoyed every single presentation tonight, and spread the word. I think this was kind of fun doing it online. If we can alternate, I like this idea, but we'll see how it goes. I think it was fun, and we'll see how the video comes out.
Thanks, Will. This was good. I appreciated it because traveling down to Denver and for you guys traveling up to Boulder's pains.
Yeah, I figured January was a good month to try, especially since there's a snowstorm, right? I haven't looked outside, but there's something's happening. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.